The Apache widow knocked on the rancher's door at midnight and revealed something that left him frozen. The night was unusually quiet on the wide desert ranch. The wind had stopped, and even the distant sounds of coyotes were missing. The rancher sat alone at his wooden table, a single lamp lighting the room with a soft yellow glow. He had lived this way for years, simple, silent, and distant from people. Nights were usually the same for him. He finished his work early, ate a plain meal, and then sat thinking until sleep finally came. This night felt different, though he could not explain why. He was an older man now, with rough hands and a face marked by sun and time. His life had been shaped by loss. Long ago he had loved deeply, trusted freely, and dreamed big. All of that was gone. What remained was land, animals, and silence. He told himself that silence was safer. The clock on the wall showed a little past midnight when the sound came. Knock, knock. The rancher froze. No one came to his door at that hour. The nearest neighbor lived miles away. Travelers avoided this road at night. His heart beat faster as he stood slowly listening. Maybe it was his imagination. Maybe a branch hit the door. Then it came again. Knock, knock, clear, steady. Human, he felt a cold wave move through him. He reached for the lamp and walked toward the door, each step heavy. He did not call out. He did not ask who it was. Something deep inside told him this visitor already knew him. When he opened the door, the porch light revealed a woman standing still and calm. She was wrapped in a dark shawl, her hair braided and streaked with silver. Her face carried sadness but also strength. Her eyes were steady, not afraid, not angry, just tired. She was Apache. The rancher's breath caught in his chest. He had not expected this. Not here, not now. "I'm sorry to come so late," she said softly. Her voice was quiet but firm. "But the night was the only time I could come." He stared at her, unsure what to say. The past rushed into him like a sudden storm. Faces, voices, promises broken. He felt the years fold in on themselves. "You should come inside," he finally said. She stepped in without hesitation. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. The rancher felt as if something had ended the moment that door shut. She looked around the small living room. Everything was plain and old, but clean. Nothing had changed much over the years. It was like stepping into a frozen moment. "You still live simply," she said. He nodded. "I don't need much." She removed her shawl and sat across from him at the table. He noticed how carefully she moved, as if every step carried meaning. This was not a woman who came to ask for help or food. She had come for something else. "My name is Alara," she said. "I am a widow." He did not respond, but he listened closely. "My husband passed away last winter," she continued. "Before he died, he asked me to find you." The rancher's hands tightened around his cup. He had not heard his name spoken with such weight in many years. "Why?" he asked. She studied his face for a long moment. "Because there are stories that do not rest until they are told." The words hit him harder than he expected. He looked away toward the dark window. Outside, the land stretched endlessly, just as it always had. He had believed the land remembered nothing. Tonight, he was no longer sure. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn and yellowed with age. "My husband kept this," she said. "He said it came from a time when his life could have ended but didn't." The rancher felt his chest tighten. He recognized the paper before she even placed it on the table. "That place," she said gently, pointing through the window toward the distant hills, "was not always empty." He swallowed hard. Years ago, before the fences, before the quiet, the land had been alive with people and voices. Then came pressure, threats, and decisions made in fear. He had been younger then, less brave, more afraid of losing everything. "I never meant for anyone to be hurt," he said quietly. Alara nodded. "I believe you." Her answer surprised him. He had expected blame. He had prepared himself for anger. "My husband never blamed you either," she continued. "He believed you were standing between two worlds trying to survive." Silence filled the room again. The lamp flickered slightly. "Why come now?" he asked. "Because he is gone," she said. "And because truth loses power when it stays buried too long." She stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the moonlit land. "He used to say the desert remembers," she said, "even when people try to forget." The rancher felt his legs weaken. He sat down heavily. Memories pressed against him, sharp and clear. A child crying, a decision made in seconds, a secret kept for a lifetime. "You saved someone once," Alara said softly without turning around. "You never spoke of it." He closed his eyes. "I did what little I could." That little was everything to us. She turned back to face him, her eyes shining but calm. "I did not come for revenge," she said. "I came because my husband's last wish was for you to know that your choice mattered." The rancher felt something crack open inside him. He had lived believing his silence erased his past. Now he realized silence only delayed it. The clock ticked loudly as the night deepened. Outside, the wind began to move again, brushing softly against the house. "Stay," he said quietly, "at least until morning." Alara nodded. "I will." As the lamp burned low and the night stretched on, the rancher understood one thing clearly. The knock at his door was not an accident. It was the beginning of a truth that would no longer stay hidden. The night stretched on, quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock and the occasional creak of the old wooden floor under the rancher's boots. He poured 2 cups of weak coffee, the steam rising slowly in the cold air of the room. Alara, the Apache widow, took the cup with a careful hand, as if it were fragile. Her eyes did not leave his face, and the weight of her gaze made him feel both uneasy and strangely comforted. He did not know her, yet he sensed that she understood things about him that no one else had ever seen. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The room was filled with memories he had kept hidden, memories that had lived in the silence of his nights. He had thought those years behind him, thought he had buried everything in the dust of the desert and the walls of his home. But now, with Alara sitting quietly across the table, the past stirred like wind through dry grass. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but deliberate. "I brought these," she said, sliding a small bundle of letters and photographs across the table. The papers were worn, edges frayed, ink faded by time, but they carried a weight that could not be ignored. "My husband left them for me to deliver to the man he believed could understand." The rancher looked at the papers, hesitant to touch them. He knew many of them were old enough to carry truths he had hoped would never return. Memories pressed against him in waves, moments of fear, moments of choice, moments that had shaped the lives of others long before he had realized their consequences. Alara continued, her voice calm, measured. "My husband often spoke of the ranch. He remembered it from when he was a boy. He remembered the people who lived here, the work that was done, and the man who made difficult decisions, decisions that affected more lives than he could know at the time." The rancher's heart beat faster. He had lived with those decisions for years, each one a shadow he could not escape. He remembered the years when he had been young and eager, when survival and land ownership were matters of life and death. He remembered the tensions, the disputes, and the fear that drove people to do things they might regret. Some of those moments had been small and fleeting, others had changed the course of lives forever. He had buried them, hoped they would stay buried. But now here they were, delivered by someone who had come all this way at midnight, seeking the truth he had kept hidden. Alara opened one of the letters carefully, as though it were a sacred object. She held it between her fingers, her eyes scanning the faded words. "He wrote to me often, though I never saw him as an adult until recently. In these letters, he spoke of hardships, of loss, and of hope. He spoke of a man who once lived on this land, a man who, he believed, had saved him when he had no one else." The rancher's hands trembled slightly. He did not move them, fearing that if he touched the letter, he would somehow make the past real again in ways he could not control. He had always known that he had helped someone long ago, but he had never thought it mattered. He had assumed that whatever life had survived after his action was shaped by chance, not by him. Yet the words she spoke suggested otherwise. "Do you remember," Alara continued, "the child who disappeared from the Apache camp many years ago, the boy who no one could find?" The rancher's throat tightened. He did remember. That moment had haunted him in silence. He had acted in secret, risking exposure, risking everything he owned to make sure the boy survived. At the time, he had believed it was the only thing he could do, and he had told no one. He had kept it a secret, thinking it would remain buried forever. Now, decades later, the truth had returned to him in the form of a woman standing quietly in his living room. "Yes," he said finally, his voice low. "I remember." Alara nodded, not with judgment but with understanding. "He never forgot either," she said. "He often wondered who saved him. He carried that question through his life, hoping that one day he might find the man who had given him a chance." The rancher could not speak. His heart was heavy with both relief and fear. Relief that the child had survived, fear that all the hidden truths of the past were about to be revealed. "I do not blame you," she said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "He did not blame you either. He understood what you did, even if the world around you did not." The rancher's mind raced. He thought of all the decisions he had made during those years, the choices he had made to protect his land, his family, and at times himself. He had been driven by fear, by the pressure of the moment. And yet, in a small corner of that time, he had acted with courage, with humanity. He had given life to a boy who otherwise would have been lost. And now, for the first time in decades, he realized that his action mattered. Alara leaned forward slightly. "He asked me to come and deliver his last words to you. He wanted you to know that what you did changed everything for him. He wanted you to understand that even in the darkest times, your actions can have meaning." The rancher closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. He had carried guilt for years, guilt for what he had failed to do and fear for what he had done. But now, hearing her words, he felt something shift inside him. The weight of decades began to lift, replaced by a strange sense of relief. He had lived in fear that the past would come back to punish him, and yet here it was, returning not as punishment but as acknowledgement. "Why now?" he asked quietly. "Why come after so many years?" "Because he is gone," Alara said simply, "and because the past cannot remain silent forever. Some truths need to be told or they will haunt us in ways we cannot imagine." The rancher looked out the window toward the hills, moonlight illuminating the vast land. He thought of the years that had passed, of the lives that had changed because of his choices, and of the boy whose life had been saved. He realized how small actions can ripple through time, how decisions made in moments of fear or courage can leave marks that last a lifetime. Alara reached into her bag again and pulled out a photograph. She placed it on the table gently, and the rancher's breath caught. He recognized the image instantly. It was the boy he had saved, grown into a man, standing in front of a campfire with a warm smile. The photo was old, taken years ago, but the eyes were unmistakable, the same eyes he remembered from that long-ago night. "He survived," she said softly, "because of you." The rancher could not speak. His hands shook as he reached for the photograph, tracing the familiar face with his fingers. Memories came rushing back, the fear in the child's eyes, the way he had carried him through the desert, the long nights of hiding and waiting, the constant fear that someone would discover him. And yet here was proof that his efforts had mattered, that his courage had given someone a chance to live. "I never knew if he made it," he admitted finally. "I thought I had done the right thing, but I never knew the end." Alara nodded, her own eyes glistening. "He never forgot. He lived with hope that he would one day find the man who saved him. And now, even though he is gone, I have come to tell you that your choice made all the difference." The rancher felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He had spent so many years alone, haunted by what he thought were mistakes. And now, in the quiet of his living room, he felt the weight of decades begin to ease. The past, long buried, had returned not with anger but with recognition and gratitude. They sat in silence for a long time, the photograph between them, the night stretching endlessly outside the window. The rancher understood that some moments in life carry meaning far beyond what we can see. The choices we make, the risks we take, the courage we summon, even when no one is watching, can shape the lives of others in ways we may never fully understand. Alara finally stood, gathering her things with quiet grace. "I must leave now," she said softly. "But before I go, I want you to know that the past has not forgotten you, and neither should you forget it." The rancher nodded, still holding the photograph. He felt a strange sense of peace he had not known in years. For the first time in decades, he understood that his actions, his choices, and even his fears had not been in vain. As she walked to the door, he realized that the midnight knock had changed everything. What had begun as a moment of fear had become a turning point in his life, a chance to face the past, to understand its meaning, and to find a measure of peace he had long thought impossible. When the door closed behind her, he stood in the quiet room, the photograph clutched in his hands. The night seemed brighter somehow, filled with the soft promise that even in the darkest moments, courage and kindness can endure. And as the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, the rancher understood that the past, once a shadow over his life, could now become a source of hope, remembrance, and healing. The next morning began quietly on the ranch, though the events of the night still hung heavily in the air. The rancher awoke before sunrise, his mind restless, replaying every word Alara had spoken. He had never thought much about forgiveness, not for himself, and certainly not for the past he had carried alone. But the visit had changed something inside him. He poured himself a cup of coffee and stepped onto the porch, watching the horizon glow faintly with the first light of day. The desert was calm, but the calmness felt like a mask over his heart, which was now stirring with memories and emotions long buried. Alara had returned to the kitchen, quietly arranging the few things she had brought. She did not speak immediately, sensing that he needed space to gather his thoughts. The rancher finally joined her, and they sat together at the small wooden table, the photograph still lying between them like a bridge across decades of time. "Tell me everything," the rancher said finally, his voice low and hesitant. "I want to understand what really happened." "I need to hear it from you." Alara looked at him calmly, her eyes steady. "It is not just my story," she said. "It is his story and yours, and a story that connects all of us. You were part of it, whether you knew it or not." She reached for one of the letters, carefully unfolding it so the fragile paper would not tear. He wrote about the camp, about the people who lived there, and about the fear that grew when families were threatened. But he also wrote about you. The rancher leaned forward, unsure if he wanted to hear what she had to say. Memories pressed against him. The tension in the air during those long days, the whispers of people moving through the desert, the fear in children's eyes. He remembered making choices that had changed lives, both in small ways and in ways that now, with the passing of years, seemed enormous. He remembered you saving him, Alara continued. He remembered that night when you took him away from the danger he could not have survived alone. He never knew your name then, and you never told him, but he never forgot the man who gave him a chance. The rancher's hands shook slightly as he placed his own cup on the table. He had acted without thinking, driven by instinct and a deep sense of what was right. At the time, he had assumed it was a small thing, a quiet act that would remain hidden forever. But now, he saw that even the smallest acts of courage could leave a lasting mark. "Why didn't he ever try to find me sooner?" he asked. "If he remembered, why wait so long?" Alara's voice softened. "He did try in his own way. He searched for years, quietly, never giving up hope that one day he would discover the truth. But life is complicated, and the paths people take are not always direct. He passed away before he could meet you in person. That is why I am here now, to deliver his words, his thanks, and his story, so it will not be lost." The rancher closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. He felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that the child he had saved had survived and lived a full life, and sorrow for the man who had passed before he could say thank you. He had carried the secret for decades, and now it was no longer a secret. The truth had returned to him in the form of a woman who had traveled miles to ensure that the story was told. Ilara placed another photograph on the table. This one showed a young man standing proudly beside a campfire, the light illuminating his face. His eyes were familiar, the same eyes the rancher remembered from that long-ago night. "This is him as he grew up," she said. "The boy you saved became a man. He carried your kindness with him through his life. He believed that you were a man of courage, even when the world around you forced difficult choices." The rancher felt his throat tighten. He had never imagined that his actions could have such an impact, could be remembered and cherished in this way. He had believed that life moved forward, that the past faded into dust, and yet here was proof that one night, one choice had changed everything. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice rough. "I never thought it mattered." Ilara shook her head gently. "It mattered more than you can imagine. Your courage saved him, and your humanity shaped who he became. The world often forgets acts of kindness, but they do not vanish. They live on in the people who are touched by them." The rancher leaned back in his chair, his mind filled with a mixture of shame and pride. He thought of the boy's terrified face, the long journey through the desert, the nights spent hiding and hoping. He thought of the countless decisions he had made to protect the land and the people he cared about, and how those decisions had rippled outward in ways he could never have predicted. Ilara spoke again, her tone calm but firm. "There is more you need to know. The night you saved him was not the only moment that mattered. You acted with bravery, yes, but also with honesty. You could have ignored the danger, could have turned away, could have left him to face the night alone. But you did not. That choice, your choice, defined him, shaped his life, and left a mark that could never be erased." The rancher's eyes filled with tears. He had spent so many years burdened by guilt, by fear of judgment, by the weight of decisions made in youth. And now he realized that even in his mistakes, he had found moments of grace. Even in his silence, he had acted when it mattered most. Ilara's voice softened further. "He wanted you to know that your actions gave him hope, even when the world seemed cruel. He wanted you to understand that even when life is difficult, even when choices are hard, courage and kindness are remembered." The rancher stared at the photograph again, tracing the young man's features with his fingers. Memories came flooding back, the fear, the hope, the quiet determination to do what was right despite the risks. He remembered the night clearly, the boy trembling in his arms, the cold desert air biting at his skin, the feeling of responsibility pressing heavily on his shoulders. And yet, despite everything, he had acted with care, with humanity, with courage. "I never thought of it that way," he admitted softly. "I thought I was just surviving, just doing what I had to do." Ilara smiled faintly, a mixture of understanding and sorrow in her eyes. "Survival is important, yes, but it is the choices we make during survival that define us. You chose to protect, to save, to act with honor. That is why you are here and why I am here, to tell you that your choice was not in vain." The rancher felt a sense of peace beginning to settle over him, though it was delicate and new. For decades, he had carried the weight of the past alone, believing that his actions were meaningless, that the decisions he had made could never be redeemed. And now he realized that even the smallest acts of courage and compassion could leave a legacy, a lasting impact that shaped the lives of others. Ilara reached for another letter, carefully opening it. "He wanted to tell you that he forgave you," she said softly. "He never held anger toward you, only curiosity and hope. And now, even in his passing, he wants you to understand that your actions were noble, that your heart was true." The rancher could not speak. The tears ran freely down his face as he absorbed the words. He had carried guilt for so long, guilt for the choices he had made, for the fear that had guided him, for the silence that had defined him. And yet, here was proof that even in the darkness, his actions had brought light, hope, and life. For a long while they sat in silence, the letters and photographs spread across the table like pieces of a puzzle. The rancher felt a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. He grieved for the years lost, for the secrets kept, and for the lives affected by decisions made in fear. But he also felt a quiet joy, knowing that his courage had mattered, that his humanity had been remembered and honored. "Alara," he said finally, his voice trembling, "I never knew it would mean so much." She placed her hand gently on his. "It always did," she said. "You just needed to hear it." The morning light grew stronger outside, washing the desert in pale gold. The rancher looked out at the land he had cared for all his life, realizing that it held not only his memories, but the echoes of lives shaped by his choices. He felt a sense of responsibility renewed, a desire to live with integrity, honor, and compassion. "Alara," he said, standing slowly, "I want to make it right. I want to honor him and the life he lived. I want to do what I can to remember him properly." She nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "That is why I came," she said, "to give you the chance to see the impact of your actions, to understand that the past, though heavy, can also guide you toward something meaningful. Your story is not over." The rancher took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the years lift slightly. He knew that there were still things he needed to face, truths he needed to accept, and actions he needed to take. But for the first time in decades, he felt that he could move forward without fear, without guilt, and without the heavy burden of secrets. The night of the knock at his door had brought more than memories. It had brought understanding, recognition, and a chance at redemption. And as the sun rose fully over the desert, filling the room with warm light, the rancher realized that he had been given a gift far greater than he had imagined. The gift of truth, forgiveness, and the knowledge that his actions had truly mattered. The rancher spent the morning quietly, moving about his home, but his mind was far away. Every object he touched, the old wooden table, the dusty shelves, the worn chairs, reminded him of time passing and choices made. Yet the memory of Alara and the story she had brought kept pressing on him, refusing to let him remain lost in silence. He realized that this visit was not just about the past, it was about the future, and about facing truths that had been hidden too long. Alara moved about the small kitchen, preparing a simple breakfast. She worked slowly, deliberately, as though each action carried significance. The rancher watched her in silence, thinking about the courage it must have taken for her to come here, alone in the dead of night, to deliver a story that spanned decades. He wondered how many nights she had spent thinking of this moment, preparing herself to meet a man she did not know, carrying the weight of another person's life on her shoulders. Finally, she sat down across from him again. Her gaze was steady, serious, but not accusing. She had already revealed pieces of the story, but now she leaned closer, her voice soft but firm. "There is something you need to understand fully," she said. "Something my husband wanted you to know. He never had the chance to tell you himself, so I am here to do it in his place." The rancher felt a lump in his throat. His hands tightened around his cup as he braced himself for whatever revelation was coming. He had expected gratitude, perhaps some acknowledgement of the past, but he did not know what she would say next. "My husband survived because of you," she continued, her voice calm. "He often wondered about the man who saved him, about the choices that allowed him to live. He believed in your courage, in your humanity, and he carried that belief with him his entire life. But there is more, something he wanted you to know before he passed." The rancher leaned forward, heart pounding. "Tell me," he whispered. Alara hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand over his. He wanted you to know who he became, she said. The boy you saved grew up, lived a full life, and became a man of strength, kindness, and honor. He carried your actions with him as a guide, as proof that even in the darkest times, one act of courage can light a path for a lifetime. And he married, raised a family, and loved deeply. All of it because you chose to act when you did. The rancher felt tears sting his eyes. The weight of decades, the guilt, the fear, and the silence pressed down on him, and yet beneath it all was a warmth he had not felt in years, a quiet joy that someone had survived, thrived, and remembered him with gratitude. Alara reached into her bag and pulled out another photograph. The rancher's breath caught. This one showed a man and a woman standing together in the sunlight, smiles bright and genuine. The man's eyes were unmistakable. They were the same eyes he remembered from that long-ago night when the boy had clung to him in fear. "That is him," Alara said softly. "The boy you saved. He lived a life full of love and purpose, and he never forgot you." The rancher's hands trembled as he picked up the photograph. The memories flooded back, the cold night, the fear in the boy's eyes, the decision to risk everything to save him. He had never imagined that the boy would grow into a man, live a full life, or remember him at all. And yet here it was, proof that his actions had mattered in ways he could never have imagined. Alara continued, her voice gentle. "When my husband was on his deathbed, he asked me to find you. He wanted you to know that your choice had made all the difference, and that he forgave you for the past, even though you never needed forgiveness. He understood that you did what you could in a difficult world, and now I am here to deliver his final message." The rancher's throat tightened. He had lived with guilt for so long, believing that he had failed, believing that his actions were meaningless. And now, in the quiet of his living room decades later, he realized that the opposite was true. His courage, his humanity, and his choices had saved a life and shaped a future. Alara looked at him with steady eyes. "There is one more thing," she said, her voice dropping slightly. "My husband wanted you to know that he always believed in your honor. He never blamed you for what happened in the past. Instead, he carried your memory as a reminder of hope and courage, proof that even in difficult times, humans can choose to act with kindness and bravery." The rancher swallowed hard, his mind spinning. He had spent years haunted by fear and regret, believing that his choices had caused harm or gone unnoticed. And now, he understood that the one act of courage he had taken in the darkness of the desert had created ripples that lasted a lifetime. "Why now?" he asked, his voice breaking slightly. "Why come after all these years?" "Because he is gone," Alara said simply, "and because some truths cannot wait any longer. He wanted you to hear them, to know that your life, your actions, and your courage mattered. The past has a way of catching up to us, but it also has a way of giving back. He wanted to give back, even if only through my words." The rancher leaned back in his chair, staring at the photograph. He thought of the boy's frightened face, the nights spent hiding in the desert, and the quiet courage it had taken to act when the world seemed cruel and uncertain. He had believed he was acting alone, that no one would ever know or remember. And yet here was proof that his bravery had created life, love, and memory. Alara reached into her bag one final time and handed him a folded letter. "This is from him," she said. "He wanted you to have it, to read it and understand everything he carried in his heart. It is his way of saying thank you and goodbye." The rancher unfolded the letter carefully. The words inside were simple, heartfelt, and filled with gratitude. He read them slowly, feeling the weight of each sentence, the meaning behind every word. The boy he had saved, the man he had never met in adulthood, expressed his thanks, his understanding, and his forgiveness. The letter spoke of hope, courage, and the power of small actions to shape lives. Tears ran freely down the rancher's face. He had spent decades alone, believing that his actions had been insignificant, that the past could not be redeemed. And now, he realized how wrong he had been. The courage he had shown that night, the act of saving a life, had created a legacy of hope, love, and remembrance. "Ilara," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't know what to say. I never imagined," he paused, searching for words. "I never imagined it would matter this much." She smiled faintly, a mixture of sorrow and understanding in her eyes. "It always mattered," she said, "even when you could not see it, even when the world seemed dark and unfair. Your actions carried weight and your courage shaped a life. That is something no one can take away." The rancher leaned back in his chair, the letter clutched in his hands. He felt a mixture of grief and relief, sorrow and joy. Grief for the years lost, for the silence he had kept, and for the man who had passed before he could meet him. Relief that the boy he had saved had lived a full and meaningful life, and joy that his own actions had created ripples of hope that lasted decades. "Can you forgive me?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. "For everything." Ilara reached across the table and placed her hand gently on his. "There is nothing to forgive," she said. "Your actions were guided by courage, by humanity, and by what was right. The past cannot change, but it can teach us. And your life, your choices, have already done more good than you realize." The rancher felt a warmth spread through his chest, a lightness he had not felt in decades. He had carried guilt and fear for so long, believing that his choices had caused harm or gone unnoticed. And now he understood that the opposite was true. His bravery, his kindness, and his humanity had shaped a life, had created a legacy, and had left a mark that would never be erased. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the desert. The rancher looked out the window, feeling the vastness of the land and the weight of the past. He realized that he had been given a second chance, not to change the past, but to understand it, accept it, and live with it in a way that honored the life he had helped save. "Ilara," he said softly, standing slowly, "I want to honor him. I want to do something to remember him properly. He deserves that." She nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "That is why I came. To give you the chance to see the impact of your actions, to understand that even in darkness, courage and kindness matter. Your story is not over." The rancher took a deep breath, feeling a sense of purpose he had not known for years. He knew that there were still things he needed to do, truths he needed to face, and actions he needed to take. But for the first time in decades, he felt that he could move forward without fear, without guilt, and without the heavy burden of silence. As they prepared to step outside together, Ilara placed the letter and photographs carefully back in her bag. She looked at him one last time, her expression calm but full of meaning. "The past has found you," she said. "Now it is time to let it guide you toward something good, something meaningful. He believed in you, and so should you." The rancher nodded, understanding finally that the night, the letter, and the photographs were more than memories. They were a call to live with integrity, honor, and compassion. He felt a sense of peace settling over him, a quiet strength that would guide him forward. For the first time in decades, the rancher realized that the midnight knock, the visit, and the revelations had given him a gift beyond words. The gift of understanding, redemption, and the knowledge that one small act of courage could change a life forever. The rancher stood outside as the morning sun slowly climbed higher, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. The air was crisp and dry, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and earth. For decades he had walked these lands alone, feeling the weight of isolation and the past pressing on him. But now, after Ilara's visit, the world seemed different, broader, softer, yet filled with meaning. He held the letter and photographs carefully in his hands, knowing they were more than paper and ink. They were a connection across time, proof that one life could touch another in ways he had never imagined. Ilara stood beside him, quiet and calm, her presence steady like the desert itself. She had already given him the truths he needed to hear, the final words of gratitude from her late husband. Yet there was something more she had come to ask. She turned toward him, her eyes reflecting the sunlight and the weight of the moment. "There is one last thing," she said softly. "My husband wanted a small memorial on this land. He wanted a place where people could remember the lives lost, the struggles endured, and the courage that saved him. He asked me to see that it happens." The rancher nodded, understanding immediately. He had spent so many years haunted by memories and guilt, believing that the past could not be honored. And now, he realized that this was a chance not only to honor the boy who had grown into a man, but to honor all the lives touched by those difficult times. "I will do it," he said quietly. "I want to do it." Alara smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and gratitude in her eyes. "It is what he wanted. It is what we all need." They walked together across the property, the desert stretching endlessly around them. The land seemed familiar yet different, as if it had absorbed the weight of the past and was ready to carry a new purpose. The rancher's steps were slow but steady, each footfall carrying the resolve to make something right, to honor the life that had been saved and the courage that had endured. He found a small, flat area near the edge of a hill, where the sunrise could be seen over the horizon. The ground was hard and dry, but he could feel the significance of the place. It was a spot where the desert seemed to hold space for reflection, for remembrance, and for peace. He turned to Alara, who nodded in silent approval, and began marking the area for the small memorial. Over the next several days, the rancher worked tirelessly. He gathered stones from the desert, smooth and strong, and arranged them carefully in a circle. In the center, he placed a small plaque, simple but meaningful, inscribed with words of remembrance and gratitude. Each letter was carved with care, a tangible acknowledgement of the life that had been saved and the courage that had made it possible. As he worked, memories flowed freely, memories of the boy's terrified eyes, the long nights hiding in the desert, the weight of responsibility pressing on him. He remembered the fear, the uncertainty, and the quiet determination to do what was right. And with each stone placed, each word inscribed, he felt the weight of the past lift slightly, replaced by a sense of purpose and connection. Alara helped where she could, carrying stones, arranging them, and offering quiet guidance. She did not speak much, but her presence was comforting, a reminder that the past could be faced, understood, and honored without anger or blame. Together, they created a place that felt sacred, a small haven in the vastness of the desert where the story of one life, saved by courage, could be remembered. When the memorial was complete, the rancher stood back and looked at it. The stones formed a circle, the plaque in the center gleaming in the sunlight. The desert stretched around them, wide and open, yet the memorial felt like a point of connection between past and present, between life and memory. The rancher felt tears prick his eyes. For decades he had carried guilt, fear, and silence. Now he felt a quiet peace, knowing that something good had come from the choices he had made, that the life he had saved had been honored, and that the past, once heavy, could now be a source of hope and remembrance. Alara stepped forward and placed her hand gently on the plaque. "He would be proud," she said softly, "and so should you." The rancher nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not known in years. He understood now that courage, kindness, and integrity were never wasted, even when the world seemed harsh and unforgiving. One small act could change a life, and that life could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. They stood together in silence, watching the desert stretch out before them. The wind moved softly through the sagebrush, carrying with it a sense of peace and quiet reflection. The rancher thought of the boy he had saved, the man he had become, and the gratitude that had endured across time. He realized that life was not only about survival but about the choices we make, the courage we summon, and the lives we touch along the way. "Alara," he said finally, his voice steady, "thank you for bringing this to me, for showing me the truth, and for helping me understand that it is never too late to make something right." She smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and compassion in her eyes. "It was his wish," she said, "and it was my honor to see it fulfilled. You acted when it mattered most, and now the world knows. The story is complete and peace can follow." The rancher looked out at the desert, feeling the vastness of it settle around him. For decades he had carried the weight of mistakes, fear, and secrecy. Now he felt that the past had been acknowledged, that his actions had been honored, and that forgiveness, both given and received, had created a path forward. He understood that life, though fragile and uncertain, held meaning in the moments we choose courage over fear, kindness over indifference, and hope over despair. Days passed, and the rancher continued his work on the ranch, but his steps were lighter, his heart freer. The memorial became a quiet place of reflection for him, a reminder that one life could matter, that courage could endure, and that even the smallest acts of humanity could leave a lasting legacy. Alara prepared to leave. She had fulfilled her husband's final wish, delivered his message, and ensured that the rancher understood the impact of his actions. She packed her belongings quietly, giving the rancher a final look of gratitude and understanding. "Goodbye," she said softly. "Remember, your actions mattered and they always will. Live well and honor the courage that saved a life." The rancher nodded, feeling a profound sense of peace. "I will," he said. "I promise." As Alara walked down the path toward the road that would take her away, the rancher watched her go. The desert was quiet, the sun warm on his face, and the air filled with the soft whisper of wind through the sagebrush. He realized that the midnight knock, the visit, and the revelations had changed everything. The past, once a source of fear and guilt, had become a source of understanding, closure, and purpose. He returned to the memorial, running his hand over the stones and the plaque. Each name, each word carried meaning. The boy he had saved, now a man, had lived a full life, and the story of courage, choice, and humanity had endured. The rancher felt a quiet gratitude for the chance to see the outcome of his actions, to understand their significance, and to find peace. The days and nights on the ranch continued, but the rancher walked with a new awareness. The desert no longer seemed empty. It felt alive with memory, hope, and connection. He continued his work, cared for the land, and honored the story of the life he had saved. He knew that the past would always be part of him, but it no longer weighed him down. Instead, it guided him, a reminder that courage, kindness, and integrity could shape lives in ways he had never imagined. The memorial became a quiet sanctuary on the ranch, a place where the rancher could reflect, remember, and find strength. Travelers passing by would sometimes stop to look at the simple circle of stones and the small plaque, sensing the significance without fully understanding it. For the rancher, it was a daily reminder that even in the harshest landscapes, acts of courage and humanity could create beauty, hope, and remembrance. Years later, he would tell no one the full story. It was not necessary. The legacy of courage, the life saved, and the message delivered by Alara would remain quietly, powerfully in the desert, in the stones, and in his heart. And whenever he walked past the memorial, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had been given the chance to make a difference, to honor life, and to find redemption. The midnight knock that once filled him with fear had become a moment of transformation. The visit, the letters, and the photographs had brought the past to life, and allowed him to understand that even in the darkest times, one person's courage could change the world. And as he stood there looking out over the desert, the rancher realized that life, memory, and courage were eternally connected, leaving a legacy that could never be erased. In the end, he had found peace. He had honored the life he had saved. And he had discovered that the past, when faced with honesty, courage, and compassion, could bring a quiet, lasting redemption.